This is Morrison at the Little Sewing Room in Spring, Texas. Today we're going to talk about laying your pattern out on your fabric correctly in preparation for cutting your pattern. First, before we get started, we're going to talk about the fabric. As you can see along this edge, there is a section of the fabric that has not been printed, and when I drag my nail across it, nothing happens. But when I drag my nail across the fabric over here on this side, you can see that it unravels. This is the side that they cut for you at the fabric store. This side with the finished edge is called the selvedge edge. The selvedge runs the entire length of the fabric. I always leave my selvedge on my fabric because it helps me to remember which way is the straight of grain. This is important for when you're cutting your fabric. When the fabric is made, it's made in a series of interlocking yarns. It has a tendency, the most common way, the tendency is for it to go under, over, and then when the shuttle comes back in the weaving process, it goes over, under. The yarns that make up this fabric, going in the straight of grain direction, the yarns are a bit longer when the fibers are a bit longer when they get twisted together to form the straight of grain. And the fibers that get twisted to make the yarn for the cross grain are a bit shorter. In textile industry, we call this the warp, and we call this the weft. Knowing that the straight of grain is stronger is helpful because when we cut most of our clothes, we cut it with the straight of grain going up and down on the body so that the straight of grain resists the pull of gravity. Also, when we have the shorter fibers going across the fabric, this fabric, the direction of the fabric going in this direction tends to have give. So when we're wearing our clothes, the straight of grain going up and down resists the pull of gravity, and the cross grain or the weft going around the body allows the garment to give as we move. So we can sit down, we can reach forward, and the garment will move with us. If we cut our patterns incorrectly, or if we cut them slightly off grain, the garment is never going to hang correctly. And we see that a lot in commercially made clothing because they'll squeeze a piece in here, they'll squeeze a piece in there and throw it slightly off grain because they save fabric, which saves money. When you're making your clothes for yourself, you don't want to do that. You want to make them as perfect as you can. So when I lay my pattern pieces down on the fabric, I want to make sure that I lay them correctly. We're going to talk about this vintage butterick pattern. This is probably about 25-30 years old. On the front of the pattern envelope, you can see that we have a size 12, 14, 16 that is contained within this envelope. When we flip over to the back, we can see all the sizes that the dress came in, along with some information about the dress, the notions that are required to complete the garment, and the fabric that you will need, the kind of fabric that you'll need to make this dress the best. Here we have the quantity of fabric that you will need to complete the garment. When you are choosing the size that you are going to be making the garment in, you want to make sure and choose the size that correlates to your body measurements, not the garment size that you buy and ready to wear. The body size for this pattern is located here. These sizes have absolutely nothing to do with ready to wear. They are their own size range. So be careful. Number one, be careful when you choose your pattern that you're buying for your measurements, not your ready to wear size. And number two, make sure when you choose the envelope that you're getting the size that you wanted. Contained within the envelope will be your pattern pieces on tissue paper and some pages with instructions on them. On this page of instructions, you can see here the first thing that is shown are the flat sketches. A flat sketch is simply a drawing of the garment as if it were laying flat on a table, and each of these flat sketches have been assigned a letter view. Here we have the pattern pieces, and as you can see, they've all been numbered. Here we have some sewing information of what the markings on the pattern means, and then we also have a guide that relates to these the illustrations here. And then we have the cutting layouts. Here we have dress A, here's dress B, and here's dress C. You'll see these layouts are designed for fabric widths. Here we have 44, 45, and here we have 60 inch. So you'll need to know the width of your fabric, and the 44 and the 60 inch are the two most common widths of fabric. You also want to remember that if your envelope doesn't give you a yardage estimate for 44, 45, then it probably means that the pattern pieces are too big to fit on 44-inch wide fabric. So if you want to use a pattern like that, you have to choose 60-inch fabric, or you have to know about pattern making and how to piece things together. You'll also see an illustration for all sizes, or you might see here's a size 6-8, here's a 10, 12, 14, 16, and here's a size 6 through 14. So the illustrations are assigned to the size. So you want to choose the size that you're making, and as you get bigger, you need more fabric to cut the garment, and you can squeeze pieces in a different way. You'll also see a note of with nap, and one of these has a without nap. Nap is a term that's associated with the fabric. Nap means that there is something about the fabric that requires that it be cut all in the same direction. In the case of velvet, when you brush it down, the color will look one way, and when you brush it up, the color will look a different way. Some corduroys do the same thing, some velveteens. Sometimes we'll see a difference in satin. The light will reflect differently in two different directions. And it can also refer to print. If we were using a print that had hearts on it and all the tops of the hearts went in one direction, then we would have to make sure that we lay the pattern pieces on the fabric with the top of the pattern piece facing in the direction of the top of the hearts, and the hem of the pattern pieces facing in the direction in the point of the dart. The point of the heart, sorry. So you're going to choose your pattern layout, and then you're going to lay out all of your pattern pieces correctly before you start cutting. This way you make sure that you haven't made a mistake, and if you don't have enough fabric, you can either make plans to go buy more, or you can pick another fabric and create a contrast. Let's start laying these pattern pieces out. So when I lay these pattern pieces out, I've chosen a back and a front bodice, and I've laid them both right side up. If I wanted to cut this with a nap direction, then I would have to lay it out like this. And as you can see, this space right here would end up becoming waste. But maybe I can lay them going in this direction and have less waste. That is probably indicated in the instructions, but we're not looking at those right now because of the lesson that I want to give you right now. There's notes on the pattern piece here that says the center back is on the fold. So I'm going to move this pattern piece all the way over, and I'm going to put the folded edge along the fold, or the center back line along the fold, and I'm going to smooth down, and I'm going to pin the bottom. I want to make sure when I lay the pattern piece on the fabric that I have enough fabric for the bottom layer too. Then once it's all laid out, I would smooth and pin, and I try to put my pins in the seam allowances. I put in as many pins as I think I need. Okay, then we can move on to the next one. And now I'm going to do something we should never do. We should never move our fabric while we're laying it out and cutting it, because it can cause imperfections in what we're doing. But to keep this inside the camera, I have to move it. All right, next we're going to lay out our front. The front isn't cut on the fold, so we're going to utilize our grain line that's right here. So to lay this out correctly, I'm going to squeeze it out to the edge as far as I can, squeeze it up as close to the waistline of the back that I can, and I'm going to pin one side of the grain line. The grain line is the line that has the arrows on it. Then I'm going to take out my tape measure, and I'm going to measure from the grain line to the selvage, and I'm going to come up with a measurement. In this case it's 11 3/8. Then I'm going to come down here to the other end of the grain line, and I'm going to place my tape measure so that the 11 3/8 mark intersects at the edge of the fabric, and then I'm going to adjust the pattern until the grain line matches. And then, like every good carpenter, I'm going to measure twice. Sometimes the pattern will slip while you're pinning. The two measurements need to be exactly the same. So now I know that the grain line is perfectly parallel with the selvage, or it is on grain. Then you'll finish putting in the pins that you need for cutting, and so on. All right, next, I'm going to lay this yoke piece on. And as you can see, this yoke piece has a grain line that runs the length of the yoke. Here is the neckline, and here is the front shoulder, and this is the back along the upper back. If I were making this garment out of a napped fabric and I didn't want to disturb the fabric, or I didn't want the hearts to go sideways, I could fold this pattern on the center back and place it along the fold line and cut two of them, because this pattern says to cut two. Since I don't really care, because I'm using this little ditzy floral, I'm going to go ahead, I can squeeze it in right here. I'm going to place the yoke over here, and I'm going to again measure the pattern piece. Every single pattern piece needs to be measured. Grain line to selvage. Now I have 3 inches. Grain line to selvage, I'll put the tape measure at the 3 inches, and I'll adjust the grain line to be the same measurement, and then I'll double check. Yes, this does take a little while, but with practice you'll get really fast at this and it will become second nature. Cutting your pattern pieces on grain is the fastest way to make the garment hang correctly. If you just throw them on willy-nilly, the garment will never fit correctly, it will never hang correctly. So there you have it. Laying your pattern pieces on your fabric, matching the grain line to be parallel with the selvage, is the first step in creating a well-made and nice-looking garment. If you have any questions, please let us know. We thank you for joining us at the Little Sewing Room in Spring, Texas, and we look forward to being with you in more videos.